No one could handle the millionaire's daughter until he did the impossible. Night settled over San Francisco, and the glass tower of Aurora Technologies shimmered like a pillar of light against the dark sky. Inside, where the ambitious stayed late to chase brilliance and profit, there was a man no one noticed, Noah Carter, the night janitor. He pushed his cleaning cart down the corridor, the quiet squeak of his shoes echoing softly against the marble floor. Whenever someone passed, he instinctively bowed his head, not just out of habit, but because blending into the background was the only way he knew how to survive. Up here, in the city's highest floors where million-dollar deals were made, he was just a shadow, a faint breath among the lights. Yet something about Noah was different. His silence wasn't empty. It was contained pain, folded neatly inside him. His eyes were gentle, but behind them lived fractures that light could never reach. Every night at 11, Noah crossed the grand lobby, past the massive digital screens flashing words like future, innovation, greatness. He'd pause for a second, looking at his reflection in the glass. Behind that reflection, he saw sharp suits and glowing faces, people laughing over ideas that might change the world. In the reflection itself, only him, tired eyes, rough hands, and the quiet dignity of someone who kept moving because he must. A world built of light, he sometimes thought, and yet full of shadows no one ever sees. Noah had worked at Aurora for 2 months. No one knew his name. No one cared to ask. To them, he was the man who made the glass spotless, who erased the smudges, who disappeared so everything else could shine. But inside him were stains no cloth could wipe clean. Memories of Emma, his 6-year-old daughter, whose laughter once filled their small home in Oakland. Every time he saw a little girl in the building, a child visiting her parent, or just a photo on someone's desk, his throat tightened. He never told anyone that he'd once been an art teacher, teaching kids to mix colors, to paint skies with shades of hope. Now his brush was a mop, his canvas the marble floor. And every mark he made would vanish as soon as it dried. Sometimes, in the tiny janitor's lounge, Noah would sit quietly and open an old canvas pouch. Inside were a few keepsakes, a faded photo, a star-shaped keychain, and a small wooden bird he'd carved years ago. He always carried it with him, not out of superstition, but because somewhere deep down, a fragile part of him still believed that one day that little bird might mean something again. At Aurora Technologies, no one slowed down, no one looked up. They were too busy building the future, while Noah quietly cleaned up the remains of the present. But in a world obsessed with brilliance, sometimes it takes the simplest act from the most forgotten soul to light up another's darkness. He didn't know it yet, but in just a few days, his silence would save a lost heart. And from that moment on, the invisible man would become the teacher of lost stars. On the 58th floor of Aurora Technologies, Claire Donovan stood silently by the glass wall, gazing down at the glowing city of San Francisco. The lights below looked like an ocean of gold, but to her they were just blurred shapes without meaning. 3 months. 3 months since Evan Donovan, her husband, co-founder of Aurora, her partner and their daughter Lily's beloved father, vanished in a helicopter crash over the bay. 3 months, and time had stopped the moment that phone call came. Before the tragedy, Claire had been the symbol of power, a woman who led thousands, appeared on magazine covers, spoke at world summits. Her voice was calm, her gaze sharp, her decisions decisive. Now, each morning, she was just an empty body trying to keep breathing, for the sake of her little girl, Lily. Lily was 8, but her eyes looked years older. Since her father's death, she hadn't spoken to anyone. She refused school, refused touch, refused to exist beyond her own silence. 8 nannies had come and gone. 9 therapists had tried, play therapy, art therapy, behavioral therapy. All had failed. Every attempt to reach her ended in screams, trembling or retreating into a corner, clutching the worn-out rabbit her father once gave her. Claire had tried everything. The best doctors, the most advanced methods, endless nights sitting outside her daughter's room, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, just to reassure herself Lily was still there. But silence had built a wall between them, a wall made of memory and fear, and Claire no longer knew how to find the door through. She remembered the last day they were all together. Lily had drawn a clumsy picture. "This is you, Dad, and me." Evan laughed, lifted her high. "Did you know your mom is the smartest woman in the world?" Lily giggled. "But Dad's the best." The room was filled with laughter, a sound Claire hadn't heard since the day the helicopter vanished from the radar. Now, in her spotless office, filled with artificial light, she opened her laptop. On the screen was the psychologist's report. Patient, Lily Donovan, severe PTSD symptoms, no response to cognitive behavioral therapy, no engagement with play therapy. Recommendation, short-term hospitalization or alternative intervention. Claire closed the laptop softly. The word alternative echoed in her mind like an unanswered prayer. She had once built technologies that could replace human limitations, yet now she couldn't find a single way to mend a child's heart. Her phone rang. The voice of the HR director came through, cautious and hesitant. "Mrs. Donovan, the board is concerned. Your recent absences may affect investor confidence." "I'll handle it," she said quietly, ending the call. Her tone calm, but her soul hollow. She looked around her office. Everything was still perfect. Organized, clean, lifeless. The framed photos were still there. Evan holding Lily, the three of them smiling beneath Italian sunlight. She brushed her fingers over the cold frame, feeling the metallic chill seep into her skin. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass, and the city lights shimmered like the last flicker of a fading dream. Only one question lingered inside her. How can someone run an empire yet fail to save her own child? Down below, in the same tower built on ambition and glass, another soul was fighting the same war, not with power, but with silence. And soon their two broken worlds would collide and begin to heal together. Morning in the old Mission Avenue apartment complex in San Francisco always began the same way. The smell of burnt coffee from the downstairs kitchen and the distant hum of traffic. In a small room at the end of the third-floor hallway, Noah Carter woke up at 5:30, just as he did every day. He sat up in the dark without turning on the light. The faint glow from the door crack revealed familiar things. A narrow bed, a scratched wooden desk, and a wall covered with photos of a smiling little girl. Emma. Next to the photo hung a yellowed note, written in soft, slanted handwriting. "I can't live where our daughter's laughter used to be." Just 6 lines. Yet every time Noah read them, his chest tightened, as if the pain were new again. He had read that letter hundreds of times. It was the last thing left of Grace, his wife. She had been a pediatric nurse, gentle, kind, always smelling faintly of soap. She was the one he thought he'd grow old with, but grief had stolen her long before she disappeared. 6 years ago, Noah had been an art teacher at a small high school. His life was modest, but full. Each afternoon, Emma would run to greet him at the door. "Daddy, I drew a bird today." He'd crouch down, pretending to be amazed. "Did you draw it with your heart?" "Yes, because my teacher said hearts make the best paintbrushes." They'd laugh. Those moments felt eternal, until the day they weren't. On a rainy October afternoon, Grace was driving Emma home from school. A truck lost control at an intersection. Noah got the call while teaching. The phone slipped from his hand, shattering his world. He ran to the hospital, his pulse pounding like a storm. When the doctor stepped out, one look was enough. Emma was gone. Grace survived, but the woman he knew did not. The months that followed blurred into one long ache. Grace stopped speaking, stopped crying. She'd sit in Emma's room, staring at the empty bed, sometimes smiling at nothing. Noah tried to reach her, to hold her hand, to tell her they still had each other. But one cold February morning, he woke up to an empty bed and a letter. 6 lines. And then she was gone. No trace, no word, only silence. From that day, Noah was no longer who he had been. He quit teaching, sold their home, and drifted between jobs, moving boxes, driving trucks, delivering packages, anything to keep busy. But then he discovered something. No one looks at the janitor. And when no one looks at you, they don't ask questions that hurt. Why are you sad? Do you have a family? No one asked, no one cared. And in that silence, Noah found safety. Yet every night in that tiny apartment, he kept doing the one thing that kept him alive, making toys. From scraps of wood, he carved birds, rabbits, small cars, the same kinds that once made Emma laugh. He stitched and carved carefully, as if each toy carried a piece of her spirit. Sometimes he whispered, "See, Emma? I still remember, still know your favorite colors." And he'd smile, tired, but real. The next morning, he'd put on his faded Navy uniform, clip the badge that read Noah C., and walk into the shining glass tower of Aurora Technologies. No one there knew he'd once been a teacher. No one knew the gentle man who mopped the floors had a heart that had once been torn apart by loss. And no one imagined that same broken heart, cracked but still beating, would soon save another child from the same darkness he had once fallen into. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Aurora Technologies, painting long golden lines across the lobby floor. People rushed to pack up. Heels clicked on marble. Elevators chimed. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. Only Noah Carter remained, quietly pushing his mop across the gleaming tiles. Slow, steady, deliberate. He worked as if it were a ritual, something that didn't just clean floors, but kept his mind from collapsing. That was when he heard a faint sob. At first, Noah thought it was just the hum of the building, but then it came again. Soft, trembling, like someone trying not to be heard. He looked up, pausing mid-motion. The sound came from behind the marble column at the far end of the hallway, a dim corner without cameras or light. He hesitated for a moment. He knew the rules. Janitors weren't to interact with the executives' families, especially Lily Donovan, the CEO's daughter, the girl the whole building whispered about but never saw. Then the sob came again, small and raw enough to make his chest ache. Without another thought, Noah set the mop aside and walked slowly toward the sound. Behind the column, he found her, Lily, curled up on the cold floor, knees tucked to her chest, face buried in her arms. For a heartbeat, Noah froze. There was something painfully familiar in the way she trembled, as if grief had the same posture in every child. Her small body trembled, as if she feared even the air might hurt her. Noah stopped a few feet away, keeping a respectful distance. For a long while there was nothing but the low hum of the air conditioner and the shaky rhythm of a child's breathing. Then Noah quietly knelt down. His knees touched the marble, the sound soft but distinct in the silence. Lily flinched slightly but didn't look up. He said nothing. He didn't move closer or try to speak. He just sat there, a quiet presence letting her know somehow that she wasn't alone. Time passed slowly. 5 seconds. 10. A minute. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. A wooden bird. It was simple, pale brown, one wing slightly uneven, hand-carved and imperfect, but warm. Noah placed it gently on the floor, midway between them. He didn't say a word. He simply sat, hands resting on his knees, his eyes calm, kind, steady. Lily slowly lifted her head. Her swollen eyes met the bird first, then the quiet man across from her. He didn't smile or speak, just gave a small nod, a silent way of saying, "It's okay." She hesitated, then reached out. Her fingers brushed the wood. Rough, real, human. She pulled it close, holding it to her chest. And in that fragile, miraculous moment, the crying stopped. Not because anyone told her to stop, but because for the first time in months, she felt safe. Noah didn't move. He understood that silence was sometimes the only language broken hearts could still hear. He gave her time to breathe, to calm, to just be. After 5 quiet minutes, he stood up, picked up his mop, and walked away without a glance back. He didn't know that, high above on the 58th floor, Claire Donovan had been watching the entire scene unfold on a security feed. She sat frozen before the screen, both hands over her mouth as tears streamed down her face and splashed onto the keyboard. Because in that moment, she had just witnessed something no money, no status, no expertise could ever buy. A miracle. The next morning, a thin fog hung over San Francisco like breath on glass. Inside Aurora Technologies, almost no one noticed something unusual. Lily Donovan, the girl who hadn't left her mother's office in 3 months, had stepped into the ground floor hallway. She walked slowly, clutching the wooden bird against her chest. Her eyes were still swollen, but in them glimmered a faint spark, the first hint of light after a long storm. Across the lobby, Noah Carter was wiping down tables in the staff cafe. He worked quietly, unaware that a small pair of footsteps was moving toward him. When Lily appeared in the doorway, he sensed it, not by sound, but by silence. The soft hum of machines and distant chatter seemed to fade. He looked up. She stood there, holding the bird, watching him with shy, uncertain eyes. Neither spoke at first. Lily walked closer, then sat on the floor, 3 steps away. Noah kept cleaning, not looking at her, and said softly, almost teasingly, "Sorry, I don't have a new bird today." She said nothing. He set the cloth aside, crouched down, still keeping a safe distance. From his pocket, he took out a plastic bottle cap, faded blue, and placed it between them. "You know," he began gently, "there was once a little bottle cap. Everyone thought it was useless. They threw it away. But it wasn't sad, because it knew a secret." Lily tilted her head, her voice barely above a whisper, the first sound she had made in weeks. "What secret?" Noah blinked, surprised. That fragile little voice carried more life than he'd heard in months. He smiled. It knew its worth wasn't about how others saw it, but how it saw itself. Lily's gaze fell to the tiny cap on the floor. "Was the cap sad?" she asked softly. He paused, then nodded. "Yes, very sad. But then it met a friend, and that friend showed it that being sad doesn't mean you're weak." She hugged the wooden bird tighter. "Are you sad too?" He looked at her, eyes warm, voice trembling slightly. "I used to be, very sad, and sometimes I still am." "Why?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "Because I lost someone very important." Lily looked at him, wide-eyed, and whispered, "I lost my dad too." Silence filled the space, deep, weighty, alive. The hum of the air vents, the faint sound of traffic, all faded into nothing. Noah spoke softly. "I know, and I'm so sorry." No more words were needed. They simply sat there, a man who had lost a child, and a child who had lost her father. Between them lay a wooden bird, a blue cap, and a shared grief that didn't need explaining. High above, Claire Donovan watched through the security feed, tears streaming down her face once more. She saw her daughter speaking, listening, living. For the first time in 3 months, Lily had spoken, and the one who reached her wasn't a doctor, not a therapist, but the invisible janitor. That night, in his small apartment, Noah sat before Emma's photograph. He spoke softly, voice trembling but warm. "I met a little girl today, Emma. She's hurting, just like you once did. But when I saw her, I saw you. And I thought, maybe you sent her to me so I could try to live again." He smiled faintly, eyes glistening under the pale moonlight. For the first time in 6 years, there was real light in his eyes again. The next morning, Claire Donovan arrived at the office earlier than usual. She hadn't slept. All night, her mind kept replaying the image of the man in the Navy uniform, the man who had made her daughter speak again, using nothing but silence and a small wooden toy. She opened the company's HR database and searched for Noah Carter. Contract employee, Aurora Cleaning Division, age 39. Education, Bachelor's in Art Education, University of California. Previous occupation, art teacher, Bayview High School. Her eyes stopped at the last line. Reason for leaving, personal. She exhaled slowly, feeling something between curiosity and admiration. A man who once taught children how to see beauty now spent his nights scrubbing floors. And somehow he had done what no one else could. Near noon, she went down to the ground floor. No entourage, no assistant, just a mother who needed to understand the man who had reached her child. Noah was cleaning the large glass wall in the lobby when he heard the sharp click of heels. He turned. She stood there, tall, composed, hair tied back, wearing a white shirt, her sharp eyes softened by exhaustion. "You're Noah Carter, right?" "Yes, ma'am." He set the mop aside and took a step back. "I'm Claire Donovan." "I know," he said quietly, lowering his gaze. A brief silence followed, the air conditioner humming faintly, the scent of her perfume lingering in the space between them. "You helped my daughter," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "For 3 months, no one could get her to speak, but you somehow did." "How?" Noah hesitated, then replied softly, "I didn't do anything, ma'am. I just stayed there." She frowned slightly. "You just sat there, and she stopped crying? I hired 9 specialists, 8 caregivers. All failed." He nodded once. "I used to be a teacher. Maybe I understand children a little." "Teacher?" she repeated. "I read your file. You taught art. Why did you stop?" He clasped his hands in front of him, eyes down. "Because sometimes life breaks you in a way that makes it hard to stand in front of a child again." Claire went still. The weight in his voice made her chest tighten. "You lost someone," she said softly. Noah's gaze dropped to the floor. "My daughter, 6 years ago. 6 years." Silence filled the space like fog. Claire swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "It's all right. It was a long time ago. But pain, it doesn't disappear. You just learn to live with it." She nodded. Their eyes met, not as CEO and employee, but as 2 people who had both been broken in the same way. After a pause, Claire said, "I want to ask you to help my daughter, officially, not as a janitor, but as a friend, someone she can trust." Noah looked surprised. "I'm not a therapist, ma'am. I have no credentials." "You have something they don't," she said softly. "A heart." He smiled faintly, sad but warm. "If I do this, I have one condition. Don't let her think I'm replacing her father. I just want to be there, to listen." Claire nodded, a rare smile flickering through the fatigue. "That's exactly what I want, too." They shook hands, not the handshake of a boss and her employee, but of 2 people trying to find hope in the same darkness. From that moment on, between 2 souls who had lost everything, a new journey began, not to erase the pain, but to learn how to live with it together. 2 weeks after Claire Donovan met Noah Carter, the atmosphere at Aurora Technologies had shifted. Every afternoon at precisely 3 o'clock, people saw Lily Donovan sitting in the ground floor cafe beside the janitor. She would clutch her wooden bird and listen intently as he told stories. Simple, beautiful tales spun from bottle caps, paper cups, and scraps of fabric. At first, people just smiled as they passed. But soon, the glances grew more frequent. Someone took a photo, then another. Within days, the images spread through the company's internal network. It didn't take long for the news to reach the boardroom. A closed meeting was called on the 58th floor. "We can't have a janitor without certification spending unsupervised time with the CEO's daughter," declared Victoria Chen, her tone sharp and cold. Another member, David Park, added, "I heard the man lost a child in an accident. That could affect his psychological stability around kids." Claire sat at the head of the table, silent. Her face betrayed nothing, but her eyes carried a fatigue mixed with quiet determination. Finally, she set her pen down and said calmly, "I know everything about his past, and that's why I trust him. No one understands my daughter better." Victoria frowned. "Claire, you're letting emotion override logic. Think of the company's image. If the press finds out the CEO hired a janitor to heal her child, it will look desperate." Claire's voice dropped, low but sharp as glass. "For 3 months, my daughter didn't speak, didn't smile. Every expert failed. And now, a man with no credentials makes her laugh. That's not weakness, that's a miracle." "If you still can't see why that matters," Claire said quietly, "then maybe this table isn't the place for you." Silence fell. No one spoke again. The meeting ended, but the storm was only beginning. 4 days later, headlines exploded. CEO Claire Donovan hires janitor as child's emotional caregiver. The article asked, a desperate act of a grieving mother, or a CEO losing control? The story spread like wildfire. Online forums split in half. One side praised, "She's a brave mother. You don't need a degree to understand pain." The other mocked, "A billion-dollar company letting a janitor care for her child? Insanity." Aurora Technologies became the eye of a media hurricane. Stocks dropped 6% in 2 days. Cameras swarmed the building. Reporters shouted questions like bullets. But Claire said nothing to the press. To her assistant, she only whispered, "I know what I'm doing, and I won't apologize for loving my daughter." Meanwhile, in his small apartment, Noah watched his own face appear on the news, a photo of him sitting beside Lily, telling stories. He turned the TV off and lowered his head. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for the girl. "If the pressure grows," he murmured, "they'll take her away from me." That night, he went to see Claire. "Mrs. Donovan," he said quietly, his voice heavy with worry, "I think I should leave. I don't want to cause more trouble for you or Lily." Claire looked up. Under the warm desk light, her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but they still shone with fierce resolve. "No, Noah, you're not leaving. You're the reason my daughter is healing. If I lose my company, I can rebuild it. But if Lily loses you, she'll break again." He said nothing. Her words struck him deeply, because he knew she was right, and for the first time in years, he realized he couldn't run anymore. Outside, the world raged with noise, headlines, judgment, chaos. But in that quiet room, 2 people shared one fragile truth. Sometimes the right thing doesn't need to be defended. It just needs to be done. Thursday night. San Francisco glowed under a veil of mist and amber streetlights, the wind from the bay whispering through its quiet streets. Inside her apartment on the 20th floor, Claire Donovan had just ended a late video meeting when her phone rang. It was Maria, the temporary nanny, her voice trembling with panic. "Mrs. Donovan, Lily's gone. I just went to the kitchen for water. She's not in her room anymore." Claire froze. Her breath caught. The world tilted. "Check the whole floor. Call security. I'm on my way." She grabbed her keys and ran for the door, calling the police as she searched her contacts for one name: Noah Carter. When he answered, her voice broke. "Noah, Lily's missing. She's not home, not on the terrace, nowhere." A brief silence, then his calm, steady voice. "How long?" 30, maybe 40 minutes. She took her wooden bird and her sketchbook. "I think I know where she is," he said quickly. "Stay put. I'll find her. I'll message you as soon as I do." He hung up and jumped into his old car. Fog curled around the streets, headlights cutting through it in streaks of gold. His hands gripped the wheel tighter with every mile. He knew where she'd go, the old Aurora building, the company's first home. Grief, he realized, always tries to return to where love once lived. He remembered her soft voice one afternoon. "Uncle Noah, where did my dad work before?" "At the old building near the park." "I want to go there someday. Maybe I can still feel him there." He hadn't thought much of it then. Now it was all he could hear. When he reached the abandoned building, it was 10:56 p.m. The front gate was locked, but he knew the back entrance, the one used by janitors years ago. He pushed it open and stepped into darkness thick with dust. "Lily?" he called. No reply, only the echo of his own voice. He turned on his flashlight, walking down the long hallway. The old Aurora Global Headquarters sign still hung crooked on the wall. On the 5th floor, he saw a faint beam of light slipping from under a door. He pushed it open slowly. There, Lily curled up in the corner under a tiny flashlight beam, holding her wooden bird, her cheeks streaked with tears. "Lily," he whispered. She looked up, startled, then whispered through sobs, "Uncle Noah? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to run away. I just wanted to be near my dad. This is where he worked. I thought if I sat here, I could feel him." Noah stepped closer, knelt beside her. The flashlight glinted in his eyes, calm, gentle, warm. "You know, Lily," he said softly, "your dad never really left. He's not in this building. He's in you." She shook her head, tears spilling again. "But I can't see him anymore, can't hear his voice. I'm scared I'll forget his face." Noah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Every time you look in the mirror, you'll see him in your eyes. When you smile, it's his smile. And when you love someone, that's his heart still living inside you." Lily began to cry again, quietly at first, then deeply, the sound echoing off the walls. Noah pulled her into his arms, holding her close. A man who had lost a child, and a child who had lost a father, their grief finding its reflection in each other. When her sobs slowed, Noah took out his phone and typed a short message. "I found her. She's safe. Old Aurora building, 5th floor." He didn't dare call, afraid the sound might startle her. 10 minutes later, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Claire Donovan appeared in the doorway, followed by 2 security guards. She froze. "Lily!" she cried. The girl turned, running into her mother's arms. Claire knelt and held her tight, tears breaking free. "You scared me, sweetheart." "I'm sorry, Mom. I just wanted to see Dad." "I know, baby. I miss him too. But he's still with you." She pressed her hand to her daughter's chest. "Right here." She looked up at Noah, their eyes meeting, exhausted, tearful, yet full of gratitude. "Thank you, Noah," she whispered. "Thank you for finding her." He shook his head softly, smiling through the fatigue. "No, ma'am. She found me." Outside, the red and blue lights of police cars spilled through the broken window, casting the shadow of 3 figures, a man, a mother, and a child. 3 souls once broken by loss, now standing together in the dark, finding again what they thought was gone forever, the quiet strength of love. A month after the night Lily disappeared, Aurora Technologies had finally returned to calm. The storm of public attention had faded, replaced by stories of admiration about the brave mother and the janitor with a great heart. On a sunny morning, Claire Donovan walked into Noah's office. There was no longer the tense gaze between a CEO and an employee. Only two people who knew they had just walked through the darkest part of their lives together. That afternoon, the three of them sat on the grass at Golden Gate Park. The wind from the bay carried the salty scent of the sea. They sat together where the last light of day stretched across the field like golden silk. Lily sat in the middle, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, her tiny hand holding Noah's. No one spoke. Only the distant sound of waves and the soft rustling of leaves above them. Noah lifted his gaze toward the setting sun, its pale orange deepening into violet. The light reflected in his eyes, peaceful, whole, as if all the pain had finally been laid to rest. And when the breeze passed, Claire smiled faintly. In that moment, all three understood. They were no longer broken pieces. They were a circle, bound by loss, but healed by love. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with noise. They come quietly, through the hands of an ordinary person, someone who chose to stay when the world turned away. The sunset slowly faded. Three small figures remained there, together. The circle closed, not in silence, but in light that refused to die.